1. I'm a female in her early 20s, scrawny little thing. Live alone with my 3-year-old daughter. Live in a 3-bedroom home with a large back section and long driveway. One of the rooms is used for storage, and my daughter is slowly transitioning into sleeping in her own bed. On this particular night, she had a nightmare, and had crawled into bed with me. I am utterly terrified of everything, really, so I absolutely hate living by myself. I get freaked out by the slightest of noises outside at night, and they tend to keep me awake for at least half an hour whilst I determine whether or not it's a threat. It never is. I'm just horribly paranoid. Because of this paranoia, I make sure that all the doors and windows are locked securely before I go to bed each night. This happened a couple of days after Christmas. It was around 1 a.m., nothing unusual for me. I'm quite the night owl. And I begin hearing noises outside. I assumed it was a possum, as I'd been having problems with them recently, but turned the laptop volume down to listen just in case. My paranoid mind was informing me that since it was just after Christmas, someone might be trying to break in to steal presents. I heard scurrying in the grass, which went on for a while, back and forwards to the rear end of the house. I figured it was a bit strange that the possum wasn't making its god-awful noises as usual. That's when the rattling started. The rattling started in the kitchen, moved round to my daughter's room, then mine, then finally the lounge. Someone was trying the windows. I grabbed my phone and slid out of bed, pressing my back up against the bedroom door. I could hear someone talking outside, which made me figure there was more than one person. As I was dialing emergency services, I swear I heard footsteps inside the house. At this point, my heart was thumping so loud that my breaths came out in the same pattern. I'm on the phone with emergency services, trying to listen to what was going on, back pressed up against the door, fearing the door handle would turn any moment, and I'd be pushed along the ground as they forced the door open. There were still footsteps inside. I didn't know if it was just noises or the house, or if whoever it was outside had managed to get in. They were coming from my daughter's room, which is next to mine. My daughter, by the way, is quite happily sleeping, obliviously in my bed, whilst I'm on the phone freaking out to the operator. I was trying my best to keep quiet on the phone, as I knew the people were outside at a window right next to my room. I'm not sure if they heard me on the phone or if they had just given up, but they had disappeared before the police arrived. I was terrified to step out of my room when I heard them at the door, in case these people were inside my house waiting for me. My bedroom door and the front door are only a couple of steps away from each other, but that didn't make it any less scary as I threw it open and ran to the front door to unlock it. One officer stayed inside with me, checked the house and took my statement, whilst the other checked around the outside. They both said they couldn't find anything, and asked me to describe the voice. It was a man's voice, Indian accent. I told them either he was crazy and talking to himself, or there was more than just one person out there. I told them I thought he'd managed to get inside, but the police said he'd done a thorough walk around. I guess it was just my mind freaking out. Needless to say, I didn't sleep at all that night, and as soon as the sun rose, I was throwing open all the curtains. The lounge was the last place I went. As I opened the final curtain, I saw that the lock on the window was open. There was a dirty footprint on the windowsill, and more dirt smeared on the carpet. I did a thorough check of the house. Nothing was taken, nothing was out of place, and the more I thought about it, the more I think the voice belonged to my ex. We are in court at the moment, because he had done something to my daughter. That's a story for another time. Access was taken away from him, and he, or rather my aunt, shall I say, pushed him to take it to court, and things have been a bit sour there. If it was him, I'm terrified to think what he wanted. He was physically and sexually violent towards me, but the fact of the matter is, He didn't even try my room. He went straight for my daughter's, which is even more worrying as I've never let him even remotely near my house. So how did he know where he was going? What did he want? What did he want with my daughter? What would have happened if she had never had a nightmare and come crawling into my bed that night? 2. I'll preface this story by saying that I moved from out of state at the beginning of 8th grade. I'm 19 now, and would ride the school bus with the same group of people from my very large neighborhood for the next 5 years. Most of the kids had either known each other or had been friends their whole life, so throughout the duration of this time, I didn't really talk to anyone on the bus. I would just have my headphones in the whole time. This isn't the most extreme story compared to others on here, but it was definitely upsetting for me. I've moved around a lot, so I thought nothing of having a lot of random people from my new location adding me on Facebook. This guy named Drew started chatting with me for a little while, and told me he rode my bus. He seemed pretty normal, and I didn't really think much about it. After that conversation, we never spoke again, online or in person. But I always saw him sitting a few seats away from me on the bus. I even sat by him a few times when there were no empty seats. Fast forward to my junior year of high school. I had started smoking cigarettes and would walk to this park in my neighborhood, a few minutes down the street, every time I wanted to smoke. I am someone who is always aware of my surroundings, and I never saw anyone around me while I was doing this. But then again, the park was enclosed by a bunch of trees. One day I saw that I had a new message on Instagram that consisted only of a picture of the spot at the park I sat at every time I smoked. No caption or follow-up. I checked the profile to see it was sent by Drew. I was severely creeped out, but was not a confrontational person at all, so I never called him out on it when I saw him. I had nightmares of him stalking me after that. Fast forward again to my senior year. A guy named Sam sat next to me and started talking to me, and we quickly became friends after having ridden together for 5 years and never speaking. We sat together and talked every day after that, and he told me stories about the other guys from the neighborhood. I quietly asked him if he was friends with Drew, and told him that he really creeped me out, and told him about what had happened last year. He laughed nervously and said, "Don't even get me started." I kept pushing the subject, asking what he meant by that. He was visibly uncomfortable, and told me, "He's been into you since 8th grade. There's a lot to it. I'll have to text it to you." I felt my stomach turn. When I got home, I saw this really long text from Sam, explaining how Drew had talked about me a lot to his friends. I'd almost forgotten I was friends with him on social media, because he never interacted with my posts. But he talked about me as though he knew me. He talked about how hot I was and bragged about how he would always masturbate to pictures of me and see me at the park. I had never seen him at the park. I blocked Drew on Facebook and Instagram and started getting creepy anonymous messages on Tumblr, one of which telling me how he loved to come to my pictures. I gave a smart-ass response to it and saw it was liked by an account with the same username and photo as his Instagram account. I later talked with Sam about a concert that I was really excited about going to in a couple weeks. It was a small basement show, so there wasn't a lot of people there. I went with my best friend James, who I had filled in on the Drew situation, and was having a great time, jumping around and singing along, until I could feel someone staring at me. I turned around and saw Drew standing 20 feet away from me, black face and stiff as a board, by himself, just staring at me. I moved behind James to get out of his field of vision, but he kept repositioning himself so he could see me. I felt like I was going to throw up and rushed outside. A while later I was talking on the bus with Sam, and he told me that Drew had a bunch of pictures of me saved on his phone, some taken from my social media, some he had taken of me sitting or walking at school. I started to get such bad anxiety riding the bus around this guy, and was constantly looking over my shoulder at school. and decided to confide to my principal about everything that had happened with Drew. He decided to get the police involved, so I waited for them to show up and take my statement. A few days later, I was pulled aside by an adult to tell me that Drew and his parents had been talked to, and that I shouldn't have to worry about him anymore. Sam told me that Drew was scared shitless and wasn't going to mess with me anymore. So Drew, let's not meet again. 3. To start off, I'm a 23-year-old male. I used to work for Airbnb as one of their contracted employees, as their Tier 1 customer service. For those that do not know, Airbnb is a hospitality service where everyday people can rent out their homes and apartments, either partially or entirely, to people as an alternative to renting a hotel. It's a rather nice idea. Although it's in a legal grey area, because while there are no laws preventing it, there are no laws guaranteeing your rights as a tenant either, as there is with signing a lease or home mortgage would grant you. If your host decides to cancel your reservation, your contract is considered null and void in our eyes and you must leave the property. Or you can be arrested for trespassing if the host wishes to press charges. Anyway, I had totaled my car when I hit a patch of black ice in a previous snowstorm, slid into a curb, and snapped my front suspension on the left side of my car. So I was forced to take the light rail to work for the time being. Luckily, I live right next to a light rail station, and my work was within a quarter-mile from another. I called into the office and told them I would be late because I just wrecked my car, and thankfully they understood. I arrived an hour later and my trainer set me up between two girls who had been chatting away, in an attempt to get them to quiet down and pay attention. Needless to say, it didn't really work because the girl to my right, Lily, would just lean forward and talk as if I weren't even there. The girl to my left, Amy, would do the same, and it was hard to pay attention to the instructor. There was another girl there, Susan, sitting to the right of Lily, who would try to join in on the conversations, but was not very effective, even though she had the most boisterous voice in the room. I'm pretty sure the two girls were just ignoring her mostly, as her comments seemed forced, and you could tell she had no idea what she was talking about, and just came across as pretentious and rude. During our first break, our conversation turned to relationships. Lily was single but was crushing on our trainer. Amy was engaged and I was dating a girl whom I had a crush on since I was 12, and had plans to propose to in the coming months. They both helped me plan out my proposal, things to do and things to avoid, and I'm pretty sure were more excited for me than I was. While we were talking in the front lobby, Susan comes up and hijacks the conversation. "I have a boyfriend too," she said. "He's 28 and has his own house and drives a Mustang." For context, Susan is 20, and I'm not judging her for dating someone 8 years older than her, but the more questions we asked, the more it seemed she just made this guy up. Now, these weren't malicious questions, but genuine questions, trying to get a better idea of who she was dating, and just trying to be nice. "Well, he's not exactly my boyfriend. He's married, but he says he's just waiting on the divorce papers to get finalized, and then I can move in with him," she rattled on. I became more and more uncomfortable with this girl. As she started talking about her boyfriend, she would glance over at me, give me the once-over, and then continue talking as if nothing happened. It made every hair in my body stand on end. I'm a firm believer that there has to be some sort of physical attraction between two people for the relationship to work out. And even if I were single, I was not attracted to this girl in any way, shape, or form. After the end of our training day, I started to make my way to the light rail station. There was already 2 feet of snow on the ground, so Amy offered to give me a ride home, as I lived on her way. I greatly appreciated the offer, and offered to fill up her gas tank beforehand as payment. Susan jumped in and asked for a ride as well to the light rail station right by my house. Amy offered to drop her off at the light rail station just up the road, but Susan insisted on being dropped off at the one by my place. I didn't think anything of it at first. but I would be lying if I didn't say that it seemed too much of a coincidence that she wanted to be dropped off at the one right next to my house, when there was another one so much closer. I was dropped off at my leasing office as I didn't want anyone to know exactly where I lived, and my roommate and I decided to order pizza instead of going out in the snow, and I wanted to drown my sorrows in something, as I had just lost my car. 45 minutes go by as we wait for the pizza. I understand that it would take a little longer to get here as the weather conditions were terrible and whatnot. The pizza arrives, and he hands me something else, a letter. He said was sitting on our doormat when he arrived. I was intrigued, as we had just moved in no more than a month ago, and hadn't met any of our neighbors yet. So perhaps it was something from them. I wish I had not opened it. It was a letter from Susan. The envelope was covered in hearts, and the initials J and S were in one of those hearts, with an arrow through it. How does she know what building I lived in? I thought to myself, let alone the apartment number. I tore the letter to pieces and threw it away without a second thought. In hindsight, it was a stupid idea, but I wasn't anticipating what would happen next. The next day at work, Susan approached me and asked, "Did you get the present I left for you yesterday?" My only response was, "How the fuck did you find out where I lived?" "I used my admin credentials to access your test listing that you created yesterday in training. I hope that's okay," she said, trying to act all shy and innocent. "Hell no, it's not okay. What the fuck is wrong with you? I swear to God, if you ever come to my house again, I won't hesitate to call the cops," I shouted back. I was livid. Not only was that a gross invasion of my privacy, she knew I had a girlfriend and had plans to propose soon. 2 weeks went by, and Susan would constantly come up while I was talking with Lily and Amy, insert herself into our conversations, and turn them into conversations about her and her boyfriend, and all the kinky sex they have now that the divorce papers were finalized. I'm not one to judge people's fetishes or sex lives, but I really don't care to hear about all the dirty details, especially at work. Not to mention our conversations were nothing along those lines to begin with. We would talk about relationships, yeah, but the topic of sex never came up. Susan would constantly message me on Google Hangouts, as that's what we used to get in contact with each other on the production floor, as our phones were not allowed because we have access to our users' personal information. Address, the last 4 digits of credit card or bank account depending on if they were a host or a guest. So that was our only method of communication while at work. She would send me messages like, "I'm sorry, please forgive me," and "I just really like you and didn't know how to tell you, can we just start over?" I would ignore these messages, and I eventually ended up blocking her altogether, since the messages became much more aggressive as time went on. "Why don't you like me? It's because I'm fat, isn't it? Why won't you answer me? I'd let you do anything you wanted to me. Just say the word and I'll come over. What's your problem? Any guy would be lucky to have me." And the most disturbing of them all, "I'll just tell them you raped me if you won't let me come over tonight." I blocked her after that, and went to HR with my complaints. I told HR about her stalking, and using her admin privileges to access my personal information. And at first, nothing happened. I was brushed off and told the usual, "Oh, it's just a girl crush, she'll get over it," and, "In a way, you should be flattered. After all, guys can't be the victim of sexual harassment, right?" 1 more month goes by, and I was actually promoted to Tier 2. Not really a promotion. They made me go, and I wasn't even getting paid more for the transition, even though it included much more responsibility, such as mediation between hosts and guests involving their disputes. All 4 of us, Amy, Lily, and Susan, were all put on separate teams, thank God, but she would follow me to the drinking fountain, and would just stand behind me, then go sit back down after I left. Wouldn't drink, just stand. 2 weeks later, I get called into HR's office. I breathe a sigh of relief and think, this is all finally over. I was wrong. I've been told that Susan has filed charges of sexual assault against me, saying I tried to rape her in the bathroom. I was dumbfounded. I asked them what proof they had, and they said they don't need any, and her word is good enough. After all, why would someone lie about something like that, right? I'd even have every reason to hide something like that, while Susan is brave for coming forward. I tried to leave, but security stopped me at the door. I pushed past him and said, I know for a fact that these rent-a-cops can't charge me with anything, so until that happens, I'll be at my desk. They let me go and I ran back to my desk, hoping that by blocking Susan on Hangouts, the messages weren't deleted as well. Thank God they weren't. I'd been taking screenshots of everything she had sent me over the past 3 months, and 2 police officers showed up about 10 minutes later. As they were putting handcuffs on me, I shouted at them, my computer screen, just look at my computer screen. All eyes were on me. The 250 people on the production floor had stopped talking. Most of them put their customers on hold so they could see what was going on. One of the police officers sat down at my desk and started looking over the messages. After what seemed like an eternity, he gets up and says, let him go. They bring Susan over to the same police officer, looks her dead in the face and says, I want the truth. Did this guy rape you? She nodded her head and the police officer replied, really? So care to explain this message you sent 2 months ago, stating that you were going to say he raped you if he didn't let you come over to his house? She started crying, tried to say it wasn't true, and that I had been the one making sexual advances towards her, but she wasn't interested. Thank God the cop wasn't buying it, he said. Young lady, we have all the evidence we need right here to disprove your claims. However, if you still insist he raped you, we can investigate. Keep in mind that if it's proved that you were lying, you'll be in a lot more trouble than he is right now. She insisted that I raped her yesterday in the women's bathroom, and so I was officially arrested and brought in for questioning at the police station. They did a rape kit on her, and the cops asked for a DNA sample to compare it to the rape kit sample they took. I, of course, gave it to him, and I spent the next 2 days in jail. My family was notified, but I informed them that there was no point in spending the money on bail as I knew I was innocent. On the 3rd day I was released. No charges were being filed against me, as Susan had admitted that she made the whole thing up. I was asked if I wanted to press charges for the false accusation and try to get a defamation case against her. I declined, and was happy that she had been fired and settled for a restraining order. My girlfriend ended up breaking up with me because of all of this, saying that she can never trust me again even though I was found innocent. I guess on the bright side, I was able to return the ring and put the funds towards a new car. My lease ended a few months later, and I've moved across town, got a new job, and pray every day that I never see her again. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 185. Thank you very much to everyone who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Special shout out goes to Ashantes, who's an old friend of the channel. You may remember Ashantes' stories in the paranormal videos during his time as a Mormon missionary. Ashantes very kindly contacted me and offered me the use of the story with the very creepy lady who'd accused him of false rape. Very glad that worked out well for, well, I wouldn't say all involved, but at least it worked out well for him. Let's hope she gets some serious psychiatric help before she actually does hurt somebody. Okay, and with that, I think I'm going to go and record Monday's video now. Feeling well enough to actually do it for a change. I have been doing 1 a day, but if I do this, then that means I can get Sunday off. Yay! Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.